Good morning. Thank you, Professor Loughran, for that introduction. I am also honored that Dr. Peter Allen will be a part of this presentation. I absolutely cannot tell you how excited and humbled I am to be here to share this momentous occasion with you. I bring greetings from everyone I have known or with whom I have ever had contact with in the United States of America, including my family, my colleagues and the president of Bowie State University, my friends in Little Rock, Arkansas, the chancellor of the University of Arkansas, college classmates, and the list goes on. In fact, if I could have brought every person who volunteered to accompany me to carry my bags, I could have easily filled a plane. It is almost impossible to convey to you how much your conference theme, Equity and Access in Australian Education, can resonate internationally. I have adapted your theme and will share, as I have been asked, my experiences with education to pursue and achieve with access and opportunity. I had the wonderful experience of growing up in a family with two brothers. The picture on my right is a picture of us. I used to be the larger one in the family. In the middle is a picture of us as adults, and then my brother Ernest, whom you will hear more about. I grew up in a family of teachers, my mother, aunt, and cousin, all of whom believed that learning never stops. My father, a custodian at the local post office, totally supported and reinforced any and all pursuits of educational opportunities. Even before that, my grandfather, born in 1873, and my grandmother, born in 1878, strongly sought opportunities for their children. In fact, my name, which you may have wondered about, was a result of my grandfather's passion for reading. The story goes that my grandfather, Eugene, felt that his name was far too common and pledged that his two children would not have common names. So, as an avid reader of Greek mythology, he named the eldest Treopia, and the younger, my mother, Lothair. Well, the two sisters were very close, so when I was born on July 3rd, 5 minutes after my aunt's birthday on July 2nd, I, of course, inherited her name. But beyond that, my aunt's middle name was one very familiar to you. It was Victoria, after Queen Victoria. My grandfather was also fascinated by history and current events of that time. My childhood was spent in Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, Arkansas is a United States southern state, although not considered a deep South state, was still one that enforced laws of segregation. However, in spite of the Jim Crow laws, I benefited from wonderful life experiences, always focused on education, and constantly reinforced by my family. It was from balcony seats assigned to colored, that was the label used during that era, that I saw the Sadler's Wells Ballet Troupe, the opera Madame Butterfly, a performance by Duke Ellington, and many other plays and performances. It was in segregated railroad cars that I traveled either with my aunt or cousin to Chicago and St. Louis in the summers. Our dance recitals, I even had fleeting thoughts of becoming a prima ballerina, were held in our high school auditorium, and our piano recitals were held at the colored YWCA, that's the Young Women's Christian Association. During this period, salaries of black teachers in the Little Rock Public Schools were far less than those of white teachers with identical credentials. Several teachers, including my mother and aunt, who taught at the colored Dunbar High School, initiated a successful lawsuit for equal pay against the local school board. Now, this was an extraordinary and potentially dangerous undertaking, given the culture of the times. Extensive research done on this issue by Dr. John Kirk, history chair at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, and a native of Great Britain, stated in part, and I quote, "The Little Rock case is described as the most important teacher's salary suit in the 1940s, successfully challenged the use of an arbitrary merit rating system employed by a number of white school districts to undermine such litigation. And in doing so, it removed a significant barrier to teachers' equal pay claims. That group of Dunbar High School teachers donated, and that was the end of the quote, donated part of their salaries that year to replace the year's salary of the plaintiff, Mrs. Sue Morris, because they knew she would be fired, and she was. The lawyer sent by the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, to represent the Dunbar teachers was Thurgood Marshall, who later became the first black justice to serve on the United States Supreme Court. Because Jim Crow laws at that time prevented hotels from accommodating colored guests, my mother and father were asked to host Attorney Marshall at our home during one of his stays in Little Rock. Well, I was about 4 or 5 years of age at that time, but what I remember most was my excitement when I learned that Attorney Marshall would fly to Little Rock. Now, trains, not planes, were the normal mode of travel at that time. So I eagerly stood on my step stool by the back window, waiting for the plane to land in our backyard. Now, I can't tell you how disappointed I was when the doorbell rang and Mother announced that Attorney Marshall had arrived, just like any ordinary person. Southern states during that era sacredly guarded those Jim Crow laws that enforced school segregation. For this reason, it was almost unbelievable that on May 17th, 1954, the United States Supreme Court issued a decision regarding the Brown v. Board of Education case and unanimously declared that state laws establishing separate public schools for black and white students were unconstitutional and that separate educational facilities were inherently unequal. This was not welcome news to those who chose to retain segregated facilities. Thus began the arduous task of determining how and when Southern school systems would desegregate. Dr. John Kirk, whom I mentioned earlier, cites another court case, and I quote, "Cooper versus Aaron in 1958 delivered another victory for the NAACP when the United States Supreme Court ruled that school districts could not use the threat of violence to delay public school desegregation plans. The legal battle leading up to this formed the backdrop to dramatic events that unfolded in the city of Little Rock in September 1957, when attempts to desegregate Central High School were blocked by Arkansas Governor Orville Forbes, who called out the National Guard to prevent the entry of 9 African American students. The situation was only resolved, it continues, when President Dwight D. Eisenhower federalized the National Guard and sent in federal troops to ensure the safe passage of the students into Central High. There were direct links between the two cases because the mother and aunt of one of the Little Rock 9, Ernest Green, were both teachers and had been involved in the teachers' salary equalization suit in Little Rock in the 1940s. End of quote. That school year, 1957, was one that our family and families of the students who came to be known as the Little Rock 9 will never, ever forget. My brother, Ernest, the only senior among the group, faced the challenge of completing his studies in order to graduate, in addition to facing the daily challenges of resistance. I had just begun my teaching career in Baltimore, Maryland, and I remember clearly on the morning Ernest was to enter Central High, my principal came to my classroom and said to me, "Treopia, did you know about the rioting in Little Rock at the high school?" I was in total shock, finding this impossible to believe. It was only when I arrived home later that day, turned on television, saw the mobs, that the reality hit. I immediately called home. When I spoke with my mother, her response was, "Don't worry about us. You have your kindergarten students to be concerned about. We are just fine." I was especially concerned because my father had passed away 2 years earlier, and my mother and brothers were there alone. We talked almost every day, and her message remained the same. During the first few weeks of September, the 9 students were not allowed entrance to the school. However, toward the end of the month, my mother called to tell me that she had just received a telegram from President Eisenhower informing her, as he did all parents of the 9, that he was deploying troops immediately to assure the students' entrance to Central. Several thousand troops from the 101st Paratroopers Division descended into Little Rock that following day. The 9 students were escorted to school in 2 cars with Army jeeps in front and behind, with soldiers armed with machine guns. My brother's comment on that day was, and I quote, "I think we will get in school today." Our home often served as the pickup site for the 9. The troopers remained at Central through December. After that, the 9 were left to fend for themselves. Ernest described it as going to war every day. As the tumultuous year came to an end, and we knew that Ernest would graduate, The joy and relief that placed those fears was overwhelming. When Ernest called me right after the graduation ceremonies, his words were, "I made it." He also told me that Dr. Martin Luther King, the civil rights activist and future Nobel Peace Prize winner, attended his graduation with our family. This was truly a moment to remember, one that reinforced our family's belief that perseverance does bring reward. And we learned just this year, in the upper part of this picture, that Dr. King provided Ernest with a monetary graduation gift of $15. The Little Rock Nine in 1999 were awarded by President William J. Clinton our nation's highest civilian award, the Congressional Gold Medal, and I was there. In 2007, a week-long celebration commemorated the 50th anniversary of the desegregation crisis. Of special significance was the presentation of this Little Rock Central High School desegregation silver dollar. It's contained in this. It is a limited edition mint by the United States Treasury, and I will leave this for you with Professor Loughran for you to keep. A fact unknown to many is that Governor Faubus, the following year, closed every high school in Little Rock. His goal? To assure that no other African Americans would ever graduate from Central High School. Our younger brother, Scott, was a victim of this action. As a 10th grader, he was forced to seek high schools outside of Little Rock. Now, my mother tried to enroll him in more than 8 other schools, but was unsuccessful in this effort due to transportation and schedule logistics related to her teaching responsibilities. So, in October, she was forced to arrange his schooling with 2 aunts, my father's sisters, whom Scott had never met, and who lived in Oakland, California, over 1,000 miles away. Other families also faced and were forced to deal with this horrific dilemma. I have often been asked if I could have done what my brother Ernest achieved. My immediate answer is, I don't think so. But as I have reflected on my many extraordinary career opportunities, I realized that in other ways I have subconsciously tried to make a difference. As a young girl, I aspired to become a fashion designer. My mother, whose college major was home economics, a foreign topic to most young people now, taught sewing at the high school. She also created beautiful garments for me, many from our collaborative design. However, as time passed, and I was about to graduate high school and prepare for college, I realized that even though my family never said no to my dream of taking Paris, then the fashion capital of the world, by storm, it somehow became clear that if I had any thought of survival, I really needed to rethink my professional goals. So I was actually honored to follow the footsteps of the teachers in my family to become a kindergarten teacher. The experience gained from coordinating learning experiences for groups of 30 to 35 4- and 5-year-olds for over 10 years created the notion that I can do anything. This catapulted me into worlds of opportunities I had never dreamed of entering. They included serving as resource teacher for a television series for 4- and 5-year-olds, creator of parent programs for school systems and for the United States Department of Education, program director for the civil rights icon, Dr. Dorothy Height, assisting with the 1984 presidential campaign of Reverend Jesse Jackson, positions with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Association of Science Museums, the National NAACP Office of Education, a presidential appointment to the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities by President William J. Clinton, serving as vice president for the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, where I formed a close relationship with South Dakota's Wallakota Indian Project and continue to serve on that advisory board, and a national judge for 4 years for the Disney Teacher Awards program. As I became involved in these extraordinary experiences, I realized that I was practicing my family's mantra to be prepared to take advantage of access to opportunities, but always remember to do your best to fulfill the task. It was perhaps these words of wisdom that caused me to reflect over the years on a situation that was unsettling to me. I recalled during the late 1940s my mother beginning to take graduate courses on Saturdays from the University of Arkansas. These courses were offered in portable trailers, and this was something new. Now, prior to this, Black teachers, though required to take graduate courses, were not allowed to matriculate at Southern universities. My aunt and other teachers traveled out of state for 6 weeks during the summers to earn graduate degrees, expenses fully paid for by the state. Segregation was unnecessarily costly. My mother, with 3 young children, could not afford that time away, so the trailer courses provided an option. She successfully completed work for the master's degree in early 1951. I vividly recall the day prior to May commencement that the postman delivered a box from the university. Mother opened it, and in it were her tassel diploma and a letter. The letter congratulated her, but stated this was not the time for her to come to campus to participate in graduation ceremonies. After reading the letter, she gave it to me to read. When I gave it back to her, she immediately crumpled it, threw it in the wastebasket, and walked away without saying a word. I never forgot that moment, and never mentioned it to anyone, not even my brothers. On January 4th, 2011, sitting in my office at the National Board, I inadvertently went to the University of Arkansas website and read the bio of the chancellor, whom I had never met. For some unknown reason, I felt compelled to share my mother's story and my family's story, and to add, it is my wish that one day one of us could accept her diploma in the manner that was denied her. He responded 2 days later, and thus began one of the most wonderful collaborations I have ever experienced. The highlight was an invitation to be a guest of the university at the May graduation and receive my mother's diploma during a special ceremony created to honor and remember her. Since then, I have become a member of the College of Education Dean's Advisory Board. My son and I have attended football games as guests of the Chancellor in his skybox, and my brother Ernest was awarded an honorary doctorate at the 2012 winter commencement. This is truly a gift that keeps on giving. I am now privileged to serve at Bowie State University in Bowie, Maryland, as Director of Special Initiatives in the Office of the Dean of the College of Education. Now, Bowie is one of over 100 historically black colleges and universities in the United States. The establishment of HBCUs, as they are known, began around the mid-1860s, following the end of that terrible institution of slavery. The initial mission of HBCUs was to train teachers to teach a population who, during their enslavement, were denied the opportunity to learn to read and write. Courses to teach manual trades were also offered. Although the early population at these institutions was totally African American, the populations are now very diverse, with students and faculty coming from all over the world. Bowie, founded in 1865, is one of the oldest HBCUs and will celebrate its sesquicentennial, the 150th year anniversary, next year, beginning January 1st, 2015. As I reflect on my time spent here, I recall how my meeting Professor Loughran, truly a chance of fate, reinforced the notion that we are indeed all connected. I have learned so much about the outstanding accomplishments of this university and you, the people that make it happen. Because of this, I sincerely believe that the greatest 150th anniversary gift Bowie State University could receive would be the creation of a working partnership with Monash University. My dream, my goal. Henry Ford, inventor of the automobile, once said, and I quote, "Coming together is a beginning. Staying together is progress. And working together is success." Education to pursue and achieve with access and opportunity. Thank you so much for inviting me to share this, your 50th anniversary, and a special thanks to those in the Dean's staff who made this such a wonderful, wonderful visit. My wish for you, 50 and more successful, productive, and wonderful years. I leave you with a quote from Thomas Jefferson, the 3rd President of the United States of America. And he said, "Let us in education dream of an aristocracy of achievement arising out of a democracy of opportunity." I thank you.